Hi, I'm Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and today I want to talk to you about quilt binding alternatives. Now let's first start by talking about what binding is, okay? Binding is something you put on the outside edge of your quilt so it encases the top, the batting, and the backing, so there are no raw edges. So that's really what binding is. And if you are doing what we call a traditional binding, you will put your fabric, your binding, on the front, turn it towards the back, and then you will stitch, hand stitch, all along here to affix that to the back of your quilt. So I've done that in this particular example and also on this, which is a larger quilt. And you can see here that it has been done the same way. Now the nice thing about hand binding is, of course, it gives that beautiful finish on the back of your quilt. The not nice thing about it is it takes a long time. Okay, so I'm not a big fan of doing that. So there are other methods that I like to use in my projects. So I want to share those with you today. Now, one of the ones that I like to do is machine binding. There's a couple ways you can do this. Some people will stitch the binding on the back, bring it to the front, and then stitch very close to the edge. That's how this one has been finished. The binding has been done by machine, put on the back, and brought to the front. But you can do it the opposite way too, and this is how I like to do it. So I've done that on this particular quilt. So I have actually fixed it, or stitched I should say, onto the front, brought it around to the back, and then I have stitched in the ditch all the way along the binding, and that will catch the binding on the back. It often creates a little bit of a flap there, so some people don't like that, but it's very secure, and I find this is an easier way to do it, and it gives me this seamless, if you want to call it that, this very difficult to see stitching on the front, as opposed to this one here where I can see the stitching that I've done to tack that all down. So machine binding. If you're wondering how to do machine binding, check up above or in the description below. I'll put a link to a video on how to do that. Something else you can do, and this is something that you'll often see on art type quilts, is what we call a facing, all right? So with a facing, you don't have any binding that you see here. This is all just the same color. The top just goes out to the edge, so there's no bordering it or enclosing it in. You know, the binding often stops your eye. In this case, it does not do that because I put a facing on. Okay, facings are strips that are put on the front and folded to the back. You don't see them at all on the front, and you can use, you know, scrap fabric to do that. It doesn't have to match the front at all. So facing is another way to bind your quilt. And if you want to know how to do facing, check up above or in the description below. I have a video on how to do that. Something else, and I like to do this a lot when I'm working with smaller projects. I don't use this on bigger projects. I don't think it works as well on that. And that is what I call the pillowcase method. So with this method, you actually have your top, your batting, and your backing is put on top of that, right sides together. You stitch around, leave a hole, turn it right side out, and then just usually hand stitch that opening closed. That's what's been done on this particular project. So again, much like facing, you don't have anything that stops your eye, right? The last thing you see there is a border. There's no other color there or anything to kind of stop your eye when you look at this. And you can see that there's no, nothing on the back like the facing. There's no extra fabric on the back or anything. Sometimes when I do this, I will actually go and do a really close to the edge stitch all the way around, kind of mimics binding, if you will, and it just makes it a little more secure. But I would not use that on a bed quilt. I don't think it works nearly as well on really large projects, so I tend to use it on wall hangings or small projects. Something else you can do is you can use the back of your quilt or project, the backing fabric, and bring it around to the front. And that encloses the 3 layers. It also gives you a border, so you can decide how wide you want that to be. And you can see here that the corners are mitered, so it gives a really nice finish to it, and it's not that difficult to do either. If you're wondering how to do this, check up above or in the description below, because I have a link on how to do this. So you don't always have to do the traditional binding method, but if you want to, you certainly can. But I wanted to give you some other alternatives that you might want to explore to finish your projects. Now, if you're wondering how to do that pillowcase method, don't worry, I got you covered. Check out this video that has all the information that you need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.